computer and just say hello, everybody in YouTube land and the interwebs. I am here with Liz Koch. Cook. I always want to say Coke, but Cook.
I like Coke, actually. Go with Coke. It's a really
I say it all the time. And I say it
I
like
like
when
it.
I'm teaching, I go, oh yeah, I learned this from one of my teachers, Liz Koch. And then I go Cook, and then I go Cock, and I like say everything. So here I am. Here
Go
we
with
are.
Coke. I like
Oh,
Coke.
Coke. And I have studied with Liz, not for recently, not of recent times, but we have done work together in various workshops, and I've taken workshops with her and have studied with her since I think 2012. And so I wanted to just get back together with you and see what's going on for you and what's alive for you right now in this moment. Like what's moving you and where are your edges?
Wow. Well, I'm literally on an edge. I live on a ridge now, up above the Pacific Ocean, and it's not mine, so to speak. But it's a really beautiful place to live, and the energy here, I'm off grid, so there is a sense of calmness in my life that every time I come down off the ridge and enter the populace, I recognize is the privilege of where I get to live right now. So that allows me to meander other places. I'm able to sit with what is, and I just notice my capacity of my nervous system is partly based on the work that I do, but also where I get to live, where and I think that's big for people because the inundation of all that's going on to the animal body, if we think it so as animal body, I guess what I've been thinking about a lot is bones. Because it's only in my bone knowing, in finding a rhythm that's closer to earth, closer to the rhythms of earth, which if you're in a city, you're not feeling necessarily, or even in the suburbs because of the control of plants and, like the restriction and the restriction on all the animals and the plants due to all of us humans occupying so much space. But I keep returning to the bone because it's the only way I know how to meet this moment and all the, what I would call madness. And there's no way to stop the madness. And I don't necessarily want to become the madness, but then there is no such thing as normal. So that's what I've been pondering.
So can you talk a little bit more about your process of like meeting yourself in that bone place? Like, and you're in this quiet place, and I know like a lot of your work involves undulation and breath and sound. So what are your protocols sounds a little too technical, but like what are your practices or your ways of tuning in, and how often are you like, does it just naturally happen? Or do you have times where you go, okay, I'm going into the bone zone?
Well, I'm resonating in my bones more and more. And I think that when we turn towards them and we start to bring our awareness into the flesh of our being, not a top down, how do I make myself function better? The shift in paradigm, it's like the bones talk to me. The bones tell me things, and that can sound auspicious because it is. There's an ancestral depth and wisdom to Mother Earth that I'm not privy to unless I'm in my bones. And the minute I'm in my bones, I start to know things. I don't know how I know them. I don't have to really analyze them. I just know things. So in terms of practice, I would say the biggest thing I see with my students is the insistence. So I play with that a lot. Like, we can want to be more present. We can want to be moving in a different way. We want to get out of pain or tension. But they're behind or woven into that wanting. It's a little different than longing. The wanting has an insistence to it. It's if I could just get this done, then everything else would be in place. If I could just figure this piece out in my health, I would be okay. There's an insistence. And Emily Conrad, who, I admired greatly, and she taught me so much, both as a colleague and a mentor, used to say the insistence on homeostasis. We want a homeostatic response, right? We want to feel comfortable. We want to feel like we could acclimate to whatever's going on around us, to not be overwhelmed by it. But the insistence that we do, that will fix things. I really want to catch that moment where I feel the insistence enter. It's like, it comes in, and to me, that's the moment of a practice of pausing, and just being with for a moment. It doesn't mean you give up anything. It doesn't mean you're not interested. It doesn't mean you pull back. It just means you pause. And then something can potentially show up that I don't know what that is. So the unknown, or what you and I think share a lot in the play, is the capacity for innovation in those moments where something is sparked that you had no idea was going to emerge.
Yeah. I mean, that's ding, 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 ding. And to me, like, that's the big vitality, is being in the not knowing and allowing, receiving whatever's coming in. And maybe it's coming from inside you, maybe it's coming from the air, maybe it's coming from the water, maybe it's coming from the sound or the vibration. But I feel like that is the life and the vitality of being present with and alive with whatever's going on. I like the way that you're talking about it, and this need to pause and come into letting go of the want, letting go of the drive to shift and change things, of like, oh no, I got to fix
And I don't
this,
think
but
you
letting
can,
go
and
of
I
that.
don't think you can let go of it. I don't even
Yeah.
think you have to let go of it. I think you have to notice it. You have to
Yeah.
smell it. You have to
Yeah.
see how it interferes. See, because that's an assumption we should let something go.
Yes.
That, like, just take a, deep breath, or just relax, or just, and many of us are going, I have no idea what the fuck that means. So, and some of us think we know what it means. Oh, if I do my breath exercises, I will be in the zone. Or if I work on my vagus nerve, I'll be okay. I'll finally feel safe. But safety, as you well know from all the things you do, there is no safety. There's more reciprocal, responsive collaborations with life, right? And in that comes a sense of capacity that I might call safety, in a sense. But no wild animal is safe in the wilderness of life. There's no prescription that will create safety. So to me, the insistence is not something I handle. It's something that's already handling me.
Right.
And so the only thing I can do is pause. And pause is really literally a few seconds, maybe. It's a kind of interruption to the insistence itself. I'm interrupting it by pausing. And I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I don't know what it is. I don't know. But when I can remember, every once in a while, I just have this impulse to pause, or I can sense that my system is kind of being co-opted. It's being captured by something. The pause creates the space, right, for that responsiveness you're speaking to.
Yeah. No, I love this. I feel like as the world has spun more and more in the past 10 years, I feel like when it's really spinning, the thing that I need to do is stop and just go into my own being and my own experience in whatever it is. And more I'm finding, like, the value. I mean, it's so weird to even use that word. It's how our language is already like capitalistic, right? Like the value, but more and more the impulse to be within quietness and less stimulation to seek the golden nuggets of whatever's bubbling up for me. Like I'm actually working on a project right now. I've got a grant to do dance research, which is amazing. And
Oh,
I've got a mentor.
congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I got a mentor. It's Paul Lazar, and this is through Dance Force Choreographers Initiative. It's a NISCA. It's a New York State Council of the Arts thing, but it pays for me to hire dancers and pay them well to be part of my research project. And I'm using all of this old Norse mythology and all this Celtic wisdom or Celtic Druid tradition and stuff. And I found out that somebody wrote about this in the 1700s, that the poets in universities would go into like a hut with a prompt. Here's the prompt: go into the darkness. They'd cover themselves with plaids and take away the, like the kilt, and they'd be in this
Sheepskin.
little
Yeah.
hut.
Okay.
Yeah. And for 24 hours, no, like, no light, no nothing, and go into the darkness. And then when they came out, they did their writing. They wrote the poem. They did the thing. And I feel like that has really been inspiring me in my process. And I started thinking about, I've been reading a lot about the Norse mythology and Yggdrasil, the word tree, the world tree. Like my family was Norwegian and Northern European. Surprise, surprise.
Mm-hmm.
Very northern, like Arctic Circle. So
Mm.
one of the things, it's interesting because of the work that I've done with you and some of the myth making and reading the Women Who Run with Wolves, the Clarissa Pinkola Estes that I've used a lot through my whole life as like research and relationship. But one of the things I started to do is read these stories and then come to them as not being like Odin is hanging on the tree. And I'm thinking about, what's the tree doing here? What's the life of the tree? What's happening in the well? Mimi's mirror, I don't know how to say it, his well that Odin
Mhm.
goes to and gives his eye. And then he drops the eye into the well, and then the well and the eye is then seeing up. And I'm like, so the water now has this eyeball. It has this vision, this God vision. So like I keep trying, and I feel like this is from the work that I've done with you and the continuum work, is this shift of perspective of not being the person who's like, because these are very patriarchal stories. It's a lot about fighting and God's misbehaving. And I'm like, well, that's just not ringing for me. But what's happening in the water? So I feel like this is again that going into a different place to come to the inspiration of what am I doing? And this place of going into the darkness to draw the inspiration of everything that has come before from that dark place.
Well, you know, that centralization of the human in life, when I think of, I don't actually know quite the story you're speaking to, but when you speak about the eye entering the water, the first thought I have is, how does the water feel about that?
That's what I'm saying. Suddenly
Yeah.
there's this, yeah,
Like to be able to recognize that our kinship is with more than human life, and that we ignore that kinship, and to feel into, how does the tree sense this experience? How does it feel about it? What is the energy around that? Is to take us out of the hero journey, which is a very male perspective, but is woven throughout all our beliefs around doing more and achieving and accomplishing. And here you have this grant, and now you better get something done and
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 all the
prove
way.
your worth and prove your value. Like, how valuable really are you? Um, and yeah, yeah, I like the bag stories. There's some really interesting bag stories around how indigenous cultures, gathered things. And but also this idea of kind of, I did a whole musing around being the bag. Like how when I wrote Stalking Wild Soas, I didn't perform it. I didn't say, oh, here is what I want to write about. Here I'm going to write about it. Here it is as a creative process. I don't even remember how it got written. It was kind of dreamed. And what I did become was a vessel. I became a vessel for other ways of knowing life, in which I am, right? A human being isn't a solid object. So if there's, more bacteria than you have human cells, if there's critters that live through your skin and, that are made up of your, every part of your being, then what am I? And it was this like allowing myself to be to be able to hold these energies of, and I don't even know if, just in a very simple bag-like way, that something showed up that I had to like go, oh, wow, that's really interesting. So the creative process to me is like that, it's very feminine if you want to put it in a male female binary, but and we have to do that partly because so much is left out of our culture. So much of it's all the directed eye to the goal, and that's part of that insistence. There's no insistence in the womb, so to speak. There is a cultivation of something. There's a culturing of something, and I think humanity would behoove to be in relationship with all the other voices of more than human.
Yeah.
And let that move us. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the voices of other and more than human. Yeah, I spent like with this water idea, like, and I feel like this is there's many layers of this. Like when we, like for example, with Emily Conrad's work, if you go into a dive and you do certain sounds and certain touches and movements and whatever, and the next time it's totally different if you do the exact same thing. Like every moment is totally different in the water. Every molecule is doing something different. And I feel like I remember this is what you said to me and Colleen Wall in one of the first sessions we had, and you were like, "Wow, you guys are really moving from your muscles. Like I can see the development of those." And it was this interest to move from the waters and to move from the fluidity and to move from the bone or to move from the organic parts of ourselves that aren't these, you know, levers and this sort of fitnessy biomechanical way of looking at the body as opposed to the biomorphic water way. But what I had recently in this, in a meditation, I was laying there and I was like, it was beyond concept of being the water. It was beyond human thinking of being the water. And I feel like, oh, that's the place. Like, that's the place. So I can completely
I
relate
think
to
it's
this.
a field. I think it's not a place. It's not
Yeah.
local. It's a
Yeah. It's not
field.
local.
You
No, it's
enter,
not
you
like,
enter a
yeah.
field, and the field is much greater than the human mind or the human brain. And so one of the insistence is to always view something through the brain, because that's how we're educated. So we're always like, I have to think about this, or I have to understand it, or I have to have an image of it, and it's a top-down model. It's a control over body. And as a dancer, that you're trained to control your movement, right? And
Yeah.
um, and the more you're trained to do that, it's interesting. We think that is creating a superior organism as you can manipulate better and better the system. But that's a mechanistic or machine-oriented model of life.
It is. But the one thing which I feel like the one place where I feel like it does transcend is in making art and having this access to movement that is
Yeah.
beyond. Like I just watched what's his name? Ilya, he's a new figure skater who's 18 years old and is doing tricks that nobody's ever done before. And I was watching him dancing and on the ice and thinking, and I could feel in my body the joy of the movement. I mean, he might not be feeling that joy because he's, focusing on his stuff, but there's so much pleasure in being able to do things physically for me. Like that's why like I do pole dancing. That's why I do all this stuff because like to let my body go in all these different places in space, like the vestibular system moving all around.
Yes,
It's
that's
just
so important.
wildly joyous. Yeah.
Yes, it is. And that's, one of the things I hear from students is how they had a deep joy of moving. Maybe they love to dance, and then mom sent them to a dance class.
And it just knocks them down. I
And
quit.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and then all of a sudden they're judging themselves and they're not. And my guess is that some of these young bodies that are showing up are moving from that joyous place without a structure of correctness. Now, obviously, balance plays a part, the vestibular system, but the vestibular system can take you all over the place, right? And like you said, if I change my relationship to gravity, something really awakens in me. And I think every being that we call human needs to realize that we lost something when we stopped playing.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
saw
we
you rolling
closed
down
the
the hill.
system down. Yeah, yeah. I
So I just,
reposted that. Yeah,
I
but
saw it. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
And
but it
it's
doesn't matter
beautiful.
what it is. When you change the relationship to gravity, you're not looking to perform. You're playing, and
Mhm.
there's a 28-year-old orchestra um,
Conductor.
conductor,
Yeah.
yes,
Conductor.
who just did an interview with NPR that had the same joy. Like I could feel it resonating through his body. Now, how do you get to this place at 28 that you're conducting major international or orchestras across the world? But when you hear his conducting, you can feel his body dancing,
Yeah.
like that through the music. Like in other words, you can almost feel him as being this kind of shaman,
Magician. Yeah.
of allowing to calling in the different sounds and movements and expressions, and it wasn't mechanistic at all. And he kept saying that it's really about responsiveness. And to him, his only task was who wrote the music. Am I close to what you wanted?
That's
You know
beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, but it
That's
wasn't about
amazing.
how to I like it was
Yeah.
yeah, and I feel like that's a really beautiful as a skater, as stories of how you can allow it's not a task making. He didn't say I worked really hard to do this or that. All his verbiage was I just like it feels so good in my heart and you know, and I'm
Yeah.
just it's so much fun and wow, to bring people into their fullness of the instrument that they're, like to just allow things to show. I mean, it was more like a listening to Mother Nature talk about a garden, or talk about
Yes.
flower blossoms or yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think it's not that you have to go down that track of of learning a skill in a certain way. I think those times are over. And I
It's
think the younger
shifted.
generation knows that just performing, just replicating somebody
Right.
else who's great isn't going to do it anymore. There's not enough creative juice there. There's not enough. We've seen that, we've done that.
Yeah. I mean, and this way of thinking about our bodies is like very damaging to people's psyches. Like I'm teaching a lot. I know you teach also online, but I'm teaching a lot of like guided movement, fluid working with the elements, working with the bones, sometimes it's like anatomical, sometimes it's, but it's really feeling into our system. And like a 40-minute dive on YouTube. And I keep getting feedback from people, especially older women, like, oh my God, it just felt like such a relief. And I know that you know this. It's like when you let go of the old story and start to crack off all the conditioning and the armoring, oh, I'm supposed to be doing this, and you just let it be, let yourself be a body and let the
Mhm.
body move
And
and
be
like start to,
curious about what it is to be
what
a
does it
body.
feel like? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What is this thing? Who am I?
Yes.
But see, I don't think it's a thing. That's one of
Yeah.
the, I think that's one
Experience.
of the places people get trapped is that
Yeah.
they say my body,
Yes.
and I, as you know, are really wanting to change the language of body so
Yes.
that I'll say, don't talk about your body as if it's something else, that it's a thing,
Right.
can you own it? Can you say, I'm feeling this? I'm feeling the tissue under my, like, ooh, my arm is going, can you dissolve out of our human belief system that we are this thing
Yeah.
that's been cadavered and sliced
Yes.
and has
Yes.
names
Yes.
and parts? And
Yeah.
I mean, that's really where it all begins,
Yeah.
naming eyes, ears, nose.
Concepts.
Yeah.
Concepts that, yeah, creating concepts and names and titles for things
Yeah,
versus
instead of
experiencing.
verbs,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
talk in verbs, to be,
Yeah.
that idea of everything is moving, yeah, everything is in motion. Everything is, what we think of as a thing really isn't a thing.
Yeah. It's this experience, this awareness, or even like the
We have
field
to
of
let
my
new
awareness.
language come
Yeah.
out. We have to find
Yeah.
new language. And most of
I
it,
felt.
like you said, is in the waters, right?
Yeah.
And I think English in particular is really into nouns. So it's not a language that's easily dissolves into verbs, that that you're watering, that you're flowing, that you're, dissolving, that you're there. Yeah, but I think our sensory awareness is where we can enter that conversation and, like poetry, find new ways of describing what we sense and feel as this organism, this life manifesting in the universe.
Yeah. Here, here. I'm in.
Woo!
We're in. It's inning. Um, I have a question for you.
Mm.
So I feel like you're very much your own person. And I wonder, like, and I like I feel I'm very much fine or whatever. Within this system, I self-reference a lot, or or my things aren't coming so much from the outer world about who I think I should be or how I should be. Like I just am tuning in to be. But what I'm wondering is for you, what were the places that you think, like, was it your parenting? Was it art school? Was it like, what were the things that what were the conditions that created a unique Liz, do you think?
Well,
I think
I
about
think
that a
every
lot.
organism is unique, even
Yeah,
if we replicate that organism and,
yeah,
say it's a dandelion, each one is manifesting. So every species, as we call them, there's still the audacity of showing up as who you are. So I do feel very much me, you know. Um, and and um and I do feel you are you,
It's easy. Like I feel like when I see a person and I feel that they're them and I'm
yeah.
me, it's very
Oh,
easy to
it's
connect.
yeah, it's very
And so
relieving. It's very
yeah,
relieving.
it's like, oh, you because you'll just tell me if there's something that I need to know that I don't know. Or I,
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
communication
exactly.
is there.
There's a confidence there, not because I'm adept at everything, but there's just it's not even that I'm thinking about it, I just am. So I do think about that sometimes. And
What are the
I had a fairly, like I don't fit into the culture very well. I mean, like the human race very well.
Yes.
And I'm kind of feral or semi-wild, I guess, or I guess feral is the right word because I'm not wild in terms of I grew up, in a in a neighborhood in Cleveland, Ohio. But I had a mother who was a farmer, who had grown up on a farm. And she didn't fit in real well. I mean, she became a nurse and she was very efficient as a nurse. And, but she was really like living with a bull or an ox or
I think I know exactly. I have a mother who was a farmer who became a nurse
oh,
and
maybe
was like,
that's what it
yes,
takes.
yes, yeah,
And I mean, she really wanted to be a lawyer, but women couldn't be a lawyer at that time. No, that's at least the story goes. That was a big no from the family. But there's a lot of a kind of abrupt and kind of I guess what I want to say is that I never learned to fawn. I was
yeah.
never raised to fawn, whether that was to behave well. I don't remember ever being told to behave well. I don't think my mother knew exactly what that meant. um, and so from a very young age, I knew when other people tried to shame me or tried to correct me, and I bucked at it.
Yeah.
I bucked at. I was really young, and
Yeah.
I would, I learned to swear at a young age. I mean, I
Totally. Yes.
I do think swearing really helps open up the channels.
I'm a fan. I feel like my mom said, yeah, she has a story about our neighbor calling that I'm just going to change the name. Your Laura called my Thomas a little fucker. And my mom said back, well, you take care of your little Thomas and I'll take care of my daughter. And that was it. And she
Yeah,
never like I didn't get in trouble. I was the
no,
same thing, not taught to fawn, not taught to make nice or be the perfect thing. And if anybody said anything, like if anyone said anything that was shaming to me, she would shut them down. Like, don't say that to her. She's fine. So it was
Mhm.
interesting. I had that's a very similar thing. I think about this so much. Like what makes a person that feels grounded and has confidence and is able to be who they are already? Like it didn't, I didn't, I see people asking like, or I see this as a problem where people are masking or faking it, and I'm like, I don't understand why, but it is that it's the fawning.
It is culture. It is a social order of preparation to enter the social order. And so, you learn to behave well to be protected. You learn to
Right.
behave well to succeed. You learn to behave well for, lots of reasons. And and there's specific ways women are raised, to be useful, to be, seen in. And I don't really feel like I was seen for me necessarily by my mother. I don't feel like uh she was too busy. Like I don't feel like so I didn't get that piece, and I didn't feel protected on a certain level because she could be very angry or very, she could threaten to kill me, and I believed her.
Wow.
Yeah. So I didn't have that, but what I did have was I had a certain neglect, which at first I have felt that, neglect is not necessarily a good thing. And as a young child, it's not a good thing. And it doesn't make you feel cared for or loved. But on a certain social level, neglect offers that space. That offers that space where you're not hooked into reading the next person and making sure they're okay so you're okay.
Great.
Or feeling like I need to, that's partly what fawning is a skill of reading the social needs of other people above your own. Now, I might have done that for safety in the sense of, okay, what's the climate here? That's why I think of her as like a bull, like, am I going to get charged? Am I going to get kicked? Like if you're in a, space where somebody's, being big and ferocious, you might want to kind of maneuver yourself somewhere. And, in my family, some people pleased, some people, ran away, and I, confronted the bull,
I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, sometimes I do, So I'm not idealizing my childhood, but there are some elements now that I can actually say, as I enter my elder years, that I actually kind of appreciate that I had a level of freedom. I also was raised in a time where you didn't have any monitoring, you were
Right.
left on the streets.
Yeah.
So, we laugh about the things like what our playgrounds were like, or riding a bike without a helmet, or, all the things we did that, now it'd be like, oh my God, they're gonna crack their heads, and,
Yeah.
there's no, like, the body had more freedom in that way. And I do think that allows you to feel something about being on the earth, of being, I guess my mother had a lot of animal body to her, and, and not being of a social order where it mattered to me that she was like that. I was always on the outskirts of the pretty girls who gathered, or whatever it was, I was kind of a misfit. But the misfit now feels part of the integrity of being a human being at this time and on Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I don't have to question that. I don't have to question what I feel or sense, or ask permission to feel it, or
right.
want your approval, or I don't have any of that. It's just not, I just don't have it.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Yeah, I know. So,
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know, and I don't know what I try to teach. What I try to encourage the people I work with is to keep sensing into bone, going all the way back to the beginning, to sense into bone, because that is where we stand our ground. It is where we know we can discern. And the more I can discern things from a very physical place of being present, I'm really reading. I'm using all my sensory system, the vestibular, the eyes, the ears, the nose, the mouth, the hair on my skin, like all of that comes into, I don't have to figure it out. I just know things. I know I want to do this. I know I don't want to do this. Is there a better way to communicate that to someone than maybe I would do? Yeah, that's where social grace can be really helpful, right? You may not hurt someone's feelings. You may not step on their toes. You may not, elbow them or hit them over the head. No, like, you might not be so physical about your holding your ground, but you still know how to hold your ground, and that's in your bones. I really do believe. And I think when you hang out in your vestibular system, you're really working with proprioception. And that's what bone is all about. The inner ear is a proprioceptive guide of seeing the world 360 degrees.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And that's spatial. And that's so much about your dance, right?
Yeah.
Is be able to read the space you're in. It's not just your body moving through space. Space is something that's shaping you.
Absolutely. Totally. That's well said.
And I think that's something to bring to students. So speak to that, because, for most of us, we think of space as empty, and you don't.
Oh, no.
It shapes you.
It shapes me also.
How do you feel
like,
space?
I'll tell you, I actually feel like space is my partner in my existence. So like when I'm moving, like, because I have such a relationship with the dimensions, then it's like, oh, but I don't have to think about it, or it's not conceptual. It's experiential. And it's like, because I've moved with it in so many ways, and it's so online for me, that like the backspace, the front space, the up, the down, the diagonals, like all of it, like this sort of well, it's interesting because lately I've been doing a lot of non-dual meditation, and and we talk about like the space inside of me is not different than the space outside of me, right? So it creates this sort of emptiness, and sometimes like I feel like because I spent so much time in my body, I very somatically aware and feeling sometimes too much in my body. It's too much. So sometimes what I do is I take my awareness outside of my body into the space around me, and I let myself sort of hang out just outside. And then it's not so much all this activity going on in my nervous system or whatever that I'm noticing. It's just being in the space. So like it's kind of like groundless and infinite isn't quite the right word for it, but it's very expansive. And I feel like because of this way of sensing it that's in my system, that's super integrated, it's like the way that my brain or my being formulates being in the world also is very spacious and can take in many different perspectives. Like, what does it look like from down here? Like, for example, if you're, I learned this a long time ago in dance. Like, you could do, I was doing contemporary ballet on point and then getting down and doing a shoulder roll and a shoulder stand and something upside down and getting up. And and we started to realize how much when you get down and when you're upside down, how different everything is down there. And it's the same thing on the pole. Like my body, my mind is formulating in one sort of way. When I'm up, I am negotiating this being here in one way when I'm vertical. But when I shift it, everything changes. And this is what you are noticing in the rolling down the hill. It's like, oh, suddenly this patterning of being is much more free flow. And
Mhm.
so I'd say that that's the thing with my relationship with space. It's like in the way that I can like turn into just being the water and have this experience, I can also tune into my relationship with the space around me as if it is consciousness, as if it is manifest spirit or whatever. And then I feel so supported and held with being
Mm.
in this
That's a
body.
huge piece. That's a huge piece. Like being held. Otherwise, we feel isolated.
Yeah, no,
And
it's
to be
like,
held by space, that's everywhere. It's
yeah,
kind
it's
of what you're
always there.
describing is the matrix, is the connective tissue. And connective tissue, I think goes beyond the physicality of ourselves. And so it is infinite in a certain way. It's a larger matrix, the
Yeah,
same as fluid you know,
yeah,
is cosmic as well as it's very personal,
yeah.
and so you're heading into fields of experience that the majority of people don't go because they try to keep safe
Because
by
here,
keeping small.
yeah, and what's happening to people now is everything's getting tighter and tighter and tighter. Like you live a life and you have a job, and then you get better at your job and you get more specialized and you get better and you go higher and more specialized. And it's like people's lives are getting tinier and tinier. And now,
Mm.
like, oh, I want a house where I'm not going to have to walk upstairs when I get old. It's like, no, get the house where you have to walk up 3 flights to get to your little room. Like
Or roll down a
we need
hill.
to be, yes, go roll down a hill. Like we need to not be thinking of closing ourselves in. Like people like, oh yeah, I got a house. It's got a downstairs floor with a bathroom and a bedroom, so that when I get older, it's like, no, don't even think that.
Yeah,
Work
and
to
and I think
having
people
that.
don't understand that proprioception dries up if you don't move. So movement, it doesn't mean that you have to be, flying through space. We're not looking at X Games. We're looking at literal movement of the organism
Just,
in play that
yeah,
brings it into, and Emily would say, if you don't move, you can't think in new ways.
right.
If
Bingo.
you only upright moving forward, your brain is also tissue and it gets shaped. And then we don't even have an idea to do something else. Like we lose our capacity to innovate. It goes back to
Yeah,
that insistence. Yeah,
yeah.
that if
No,
I keep
totally.
getting smaller, I'll be safe. Safe from what?
Yeah,
Yeah.
clamping in. Yeah, and I mean, I feel like, and that's I feel like what the beauty of like the continuum work and the work with you has added for me in my meditation practice is like because I've gotten so I want to say like aware on this micro movement level of what's going on inside. I can notice tension and let it go. And so it works for me like with meditation, like I can notice gripping anywhere and go, oh, look at that. maybe I can let it go a little bit. Even if I can, at least I can notice that it's there. So I feel like doing that, like spending a long time after studying with you and then doing a lot of time with Mary Abrams and different continuum teachers at Omega and whatnot, I started to come to this equanimity of being with whatever's going on. And like,
Yes.
oh, I don't need to change anything. I don't need to force it. I don't need to grip it. Instead of going like, oh, let me get in there. It's more like, what's going to happen here? Like I can watch. And if it's skillful and helpful for people, I can intervene or say something or offer something. But at the same time, I don't have to. Like before, I was always very much like, this is that my mom training of like, well, they probably need your help. Go help them. Help, do something, get in there. Say something. Oh, this person's having a problem. Make sure you go help. You know what I mean? Like very get in there. And now I'm kind of like, maybe it's actually their thing to work this out themselves. Maybe they need the learning that I don't go in and help at all. And I sit back and I go, okay, I'm here, but I'm not
Well, yeah, and
imposed upon.
that's a difference. That's a difference in terms of community is participating isn't an either or. It's either I'm, all in or I'm all out. I think it's a sensory experience of being present to being just present. And that presence that you're speaking when it's in a larger field, you're being present to more than, how do I feel or how does the other person feel, or you're present to what the tree and the water and the space and the molecules and so there's a way that you're actually being moved rather than thinking of intervening or thinking. It may be that you do say something profound or supportive or offering but it's not calculated. It's not,
Yeah.
it's a being moved.
And I
And
think I think
that's
this comes back to the bones. It
it
comes
does.
back to that knowing. It's like, oh, no, you have to say something. And you feel it. It's in there and you're like, it's time to say something, or whatever. Or not,
No, yeah.
but to have that wisdom of like, oh, yeah,
Yeah,
this
you're
is the
reading,
time.
I love being moved. I love when I find myself doing something that I didn't think about. And I, I call those impulses, and impulses have a very negative connotation in our culture. Don't be impulsive, you know?
Right.
And I think when you're in your bones, the impulses that move you are very animal, like animal wisdom. Like I like they're literally life itself, being moved. And that's really deeply nourishing. I just
Yeah.
feel like we've been raised to believe human beings are separate and isolated and mechanical and have to be wound up or programmed to function. I mean, I really feel like we've been captured by this this mechanistic model that is not about life.
Yeah. It's like, it's
Very
control
anti-life.
and
Yeah.
narrowing as opposed to effusive and
Awareness. That's the difference.
flourishing and growing.
We say control is different than awareness.
Yeah.
And that's where the insistent comes in. When I'm trying to control, and I don't mean saying, well, just relax. I'm talking about relax can be control. I can be the Zen, I'm just going to think good thoughts. I'm going to meditate and be present. That's the best I can do. Like the perspective of being isolated or being that you're initiating life, that
Right.
you even have that much control.
Right. Right.
Like it's a fallacy. It's a very it's a construct that has literally encaptured the human organism. It's really kept us
In line.
Well, Emily
Yeah.
used to say, and I love this from her, is she'd say things like, I have no interest being flexible inside the prison walls, and I get that. I get how structured we are, and we're trying to get comfortable in it. We're
Yeah.
trying to say, I can stay here in my cage at the zoo and survive, and
Right.
maybe I can even make it pretty fancy and make it look good, or maybe I can become more animated with it. Like there's all these ways we're trying to make it work. And I think in the pause and in the bones, there's something else being asked of us of life. Yeah. In the water talking to us, hearing what the water has to say, being able to listen to the tree. Not because it makes me feel better, but because the tree has something to say. Yeah. And we're not listening. So yeah. I feel very much that and a very logical reason why the bones and the proprioception is so important is because, one, they help us land and locate. And for many people, they don't know they're here.
Mm,
Birth was so
huge.
disruptive. They have not arrived here. And they say that. People say, I don't feel like I've
Oh,
arrived here.
I know people. They're not from here. They don't belong here. They never were supposed to be here. It's all a big mistake. Yeah, I have
Well,
close,
that may be true
intimate
too. So
relationships.
I don't
Yes,
know.
I
I might be
know.
one of those
I
those
know.
aliens from
The aliens are here. Yeah. So
because
I
I
have
don't
another,
I don't totally buy into the story, but and I don't feel like I drank the Kool-Aid. So I'm not sure what's going on, but yeah, I think that's one of the things I enjoy so much about you is your willingness to play, your enthusiasm, your delight in play.
yeah.
You know?
I mean, I like fun. Play and fun have always just been very high on my list of things to values. Like it just has to be in there. And I feel like one of my friends said to me, I used to think you were so, very, very flighty. Like you lacked depth because all you wanted to do was play. And they're like, now I get it. I'm like, oh, good. It only took you 20 years, but so I have a question for you. This is because I feel like you always come up with really good metaphors, like the spine being like a river and the animal body, or like what do you have any good juicy metaphors that are on your plate right now? And it was a
Hmm.
quick like not to put you on the
I,
spot,
I
but
I think the one I play with right now the most is tongue to tail.
mm. Oh,
You
tongue
know,
to tail is good. Yeah.
yeah. Like if people want to enter this field of play and of stopping thinking of the spine as rigid, to break down body as object, or just become more responsive, find your tail and tongue conversation and let the two talk to each other. And you might say, I have no idea how to do that. So you can start with your tail and let it, rock or move. And we're not talking about big, we're talking about micro movement. But I had a Jack Russell Terrier at one point in my life, and he had a tail that had a lot of activity, and it was a very, they'd cut his tail, but that didn't stop his spine. That didn't stop. So as humans, we don't really have tails anymore, but we do have that vibration that goes from the coccyx to the tongue. And the tongue is a primordial tissue. It's the closest. I mean, if you want to enter that fluid system you're talking about, you enter the tongue, because even holding your tongue and playing with your tongue, you can feel how wild it is, how it's kind of this amoeba thing that kind of goes, you enter into a primal response that is embryological, that is biomorphic, meaning all life has this wave to it. But
Mm.
it's a way to enter into, yeah, it's you don't have to deconstruct something. You can simply go to where the movement, where
Yeah.
movement is always, your tongue is always moving. When does
Yeah.
anybody's tongue be quiet? I mean, it's moving somewhere, even if it's lodged on the top of the palate. you
Yeah,
know,
that's
it's
true.
not, it's never dried out, you know, unless you're dead, you know, it's like an immediacy, you know, so it's more than a metaphor, it's a reality. Yeah.
Yeah, I know a lot of cultures, like there's the throat singing, the two of them, but lots of cultures have that throat singing and that undulation of the tongue. Like I've been spending a lot of time just playing with that, first from the continuum breaths, but then just making up stuff and playing with it. And then also being with a composer, musician, genius partner. Like we started playing a lot around with tongue stuff, throat singing, and the undulation of like what
Nice.
is it called? Overtones. And I
Yeah.
feel like when you're doing the continuum work, even if your tongue's in your mouth, like inside your face, you can feel the shifts of vibration and the overtones. But if you start to open up and also let let your lips be really animal, like
Oh, yeah.
gooey, then it starts to create all this overtone. I'm hoping to do a workshop on that at the NDEO is Meta thing this summer at Gina Gibney. We'll see. But just back to the tail for a second. So I have three cats. One is like a regular domestic short hair, and his tail's about maybe that long. I measured it today. It's just a little bit longer than from here to here, so it's about that long. I have a Manx cat, and she's got like a little, it's about as big as my little finger, and it's a very expressive tail. It's like she's like a dog with her tail. It's
Mm.
wagging all the time. It's like she's born that way. She's not nearly as agile as the other one. And then I've got one that's part like Oriental, the Oriental cats with the big nose and the big ears and the long tails. And his tail is like 3 or 4 inches longer than the domestic short hair. And it's like these three cats, and they couldn't be more different in their expression of tension and fluidity in their body. It's so, and even the way that they move, like they're completely different. The Manx is very low to the ground and she's charging around super fast, can turn quickly, but doesn't like she's also kind of klutzy and she'll like just
Well,
be
yes, because it's a
awkward.
balance. Tails are balance
Yeah,
or for
yeah.
balance for them. Yeah.
So it's fascinating. But I remember having one more tail story to tell. This was when I was doing a dissection with Gil Headley, and he was talking about his tail, and he's like, "Yeah, you got to be able to wag your own tail." And I talk about it a lot when I'm teaching, like, yeah, wag your tail. But in my mind, it's kind of a metaphor. I might be moving my spine and my butt, but he can like really move it. And he's like, yeah, feel this, and I'm like, oh my God, you're really moving that thing around. So, I mean, this access to that little knob at the end of our spine is that vitality, right? Like being
Well,
able
it's the
to,
wave motion. So we are a wave motion. All life is a wave motion. And that's where we feel the wave, where we feel the undulation of the spine from head to tail, what we think of cranial-sacral work of pelvis to head. And so many people, there's a separation, there's a split in that. And, you know, that's right around the upper psoas is usually where the split is. But and we can look at it from cultural behaviors like sitting and driving and things like that. And but it's a direct way. So for me, I speak a lot about that, and I speak a lot about in my Wild Wednesdays, I've been really kind of breaking down the idea that there's hydration, movement that hydrates, that opens that matrix, that plumps us up, that takes the psoas into juicy tissue that it is. So if it's dry, which is what most people who have spines that are more rigid are, is that they've engaged it as a resource, as a stabilizer, because that's what we think of as good posture. So when we start to see that come back alive, that's hydration. And then there's articulation. So in the juice of life, things begin to articulate. And that's kind of what you're saying about you are you and I am me. And we might both be human species, but we're different. Our experiences are different. And there's uniqueness there. And there's the self-actualization of the organism. And so that comes out of articulation. So it's not an either or. You move back and forth between that proprioception of articulation of, say, joints, of what is the range of motion of the joint, and then the ability that the joint is also an echolocator. So we're not just in an empty space. Again, you're playing in the realm of the actual Earth is moving us, right? Of the planetary expression. And that's very real in the proprioception. In I know where I am in space and time. So even though you might be upside down or you might be spinning, you actually are experiencing where you are. You're not dizzy and disoriented. You're actually quite present in the axis of your own body as it swirls through space. And this back and forth, to me, as the matrix opens up and there's more fluid, the bones begin to float, you feel less dense, so you can move more freely. This is where the getting smaller and smaller doesn't create better movement. It creates density. It dries us out. And we're opening that up when we hydrate, and then I can actually articulate better. So, it's so interesting because we want to think of them as very different, but they're actually deeply interwoven into how life makes whatever creatures Mother Nature has made, the universe of possibilities. And I mean, it's awe-inspiring, to think of, to be alive, it's like, wow.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Liz. So you have your Wednesdays. What time are they? Like, how can people
My
get,
wild
and I know you've got a bunch.
They're a 1 hour SOAS savvy movement class. They're $25 for an hour, or you can do a bundle of 10 for $20 each. And I spend specifically each week that I teach. I don't always teach every week, so the schedule's up on my website. But if you buy a ticket, you can use it anytime. Anytime you drop in and it says, oh, I can do it today, and I'm there, you can come and join me. And yes, I do the basic SOAS workshop online. And this year, this spring, I'm going to be doing a 3-day in Florida at a Continuum studio.
Oh, wow.
In Neptune Beach. Donna Leah, who runs the Continuum movement business, has invited me down to work in her studio. And so I'll be there doing a SOAS kind of in-depth, which will include a little more of how we look at our primal expressions, the gestures that we often think of as the nervous system and the fight and flight and the proprioception, like the sympathetic versus the sympathetic, we dissect all that. But in movement, it's expression, it's gesture, it's how our organism both gets bigger for safety, back off, and here for safety. But it's also how we come out of ourselves and express, and how we also go in and replenish. So we can look at them as trauma responses. We can look at them as creative movement,
Yeah.
And
no, I remember doing that.
Restorative movement.
Yeah, I remember doing that at Ojo Caliente with you, and like spending time, and does it feel good to be here and open, or does it feel so good to be there, and like taking the time to
And
really
they're always
be in that.
moving. It's a living. So there's no one way you want to be. They're just, and as you track your own system, you'll notice, I'm really going here. And most of us in the fitness world will say, oh, well, let's straighten up. Let's pull our shoulders. Let's lift let's hold our ribs down. Let's manipulate ourselves, rather than actually going with the movement. And in there is the regeneration of, a different expression. Like that's how we metabolize. It's the infolding and unfolding, which in embryology is how we show up here.
Yeah.
And the embryo is still unfolding.
Yes, it is. Until it's not.
Yeah. Until it's not, right. Till we become something else. Dirt for someone else.
So we really know what it feels like to be the earth.
Well, we came out of the earth, so we do know that. These are ways of knowing that we don't have language for. But we do. We did emerge out of dirt made our lunch, and mother ate every day. And mother made us, through the things that she ate. We became. And we're still becoming.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I'm just going to stop recording. And everybody, if you made it this far, you win. You win the prize. You joined us for this long. Wow. You have an attention span.